Hi, it's Katrina from Katrina Wright Property Excellence, and welcome to our shop here at Kirrawee. Tonight we're looking at a guide to downsizing, and I have alongside me here Cathy Fryer. Hi, from Fryer Financial Services. Cathy knows all the ins and outs of everything to do with downsizing, so she's going to help us today. I've got some questions here. I know a lot of my bowlers ask a lot of questions. And let's fire them away. So thank you for coming, Cathy.
You're welcome.
Welcome as people keep coming in the door. So to start off with, let's talk about, if people are thinking about downsizing, what are the different options there are available?
So you can be downsizing from a large, older, big family home to a smaller, newer property with less maintenance, less land. You could be downsizing to a townhouse villa unit so that you don't have the outside maintenance. You could be looking at going into a granny flat on one of your children's properties. You could be looking at aged care. You could be looking at a retirement village.
Okay, so there's lots and lots of options for people when they're looking at downsizing. I suppose I always get people asking me, I'm just really not sure, Kat, if it's a retirement village we want to go into, or we want to try and find a villa that's like hen's teeth in the Sutherland Shire to find. Now, I know there are a few ins and outs with retirement villages, so tell us a bit about that.
So the biggest positive with a retirement village, or the two, one is you're surrounded by similar age, like-minded people. The other is that the maintenance inside and outside is all looked after by the village, so none of that is your problem. The biggest disadvantage is that there is often a retention amount, so you pay a certain amount to the village and they retain some of that when you leave, which is basically a refurbishment cost. So you don't get any capital growth, you actually don't get back as much as what you put in.
Okay, and do you also pay like monthly fees?
That's right, so it's almost like you're renting at the same time as you bought, so you do have to pay fees, which might cover, there might be lifts in the building, so it's almost like you're paying a strata as well as, or strata or rent as well as the purchase.
Okay. Now, as far as villas go, villas are very hard to find. I know myself, in the last 9 years of doing real estate, you know, you only get like handfuls of villas. And really, I speak to a lot of my builders asking them to build us villas and they just won't do it. Why don't they do it? Land costs so much in the Sutherland Shire. They would rather put up 2-story townhouses to make more money. If you're lucky and you pick up a brand new villa, you're looking at about $1.5 million for a brand new 3-bedroom villa. I just recently sold one in Talara Road at Gymea. But the majority of villas in the Sutherland Shire are probably 15 to 20 years old. So that's something that you've also got to take into account if there is work that needs to be done to these villas. Apart from that, you know, you've got your unit living. Now, we've got so many units going up at the moment. So that's another option as people look at downsizing.
Yeah, I think that units can be great. You just got to think about what you want. Some people don't want to be off ground level, so ground floor units are great. Sometimes they don't have as good security as the higher ones. So there's a lot of pros and cons to go through with units.
Yeah, a lot of people also coming out of big homes that are used to a lot of space. Some of these penthouse and sub-penthouse units are fantastic. They have really big living areas. Where other units that you look in that are older, you know, you're lucky to get a 12 square metre balcony. So, you know, you've just got to have a really good look around and make sure you know everything that's out there. So what are the pros and cons of going into a granny flat?
So granny flats are an interesting thing. Centrelink are encouraging people to do this so much so that they will actually allow you to either construct a granny flat on a child's property or give the child a lump of money if there is already a granny flat on that property, or potentially even sign over the title of your existing house if your child were to move into your property and build a granny flat, and that doesn't come under the gifting deprivation rules. So there's a lot of other things that you need to be sure of before you go into that arrangement, including the legal side of things. If you were to sign over your property to a child, you need to have some legal documentation that will pretty much guarantee that you will retain a right to live there. You also need to make sure for Centrelink purposes that you are in reasonable health and that you're not doing this with the view that you will actually have to go into aged care within the next 6 months. They then will claw back any payments and say that that will then come under the gifting rules. So I always think it's a pretty good idea if you are going into one of those arrangements. Number one, chat with Centrelink about your plans and make sure that they will fit under their rules. And number two, just have a chat with the doctor and make sure that there's nothing in your situation that would make Centrelink think later or 6 months down the track that you shouldn't have gone into that arrangement health-wise.
Yeah, so granny flats have become very popular in the Sutherland Shire. There's quite a lot of construction people coming around building granny flats. And there's a company that I do a bit of dealings with. They're at Engadine, and their pricing for granny flats range anywhere between sort of 100 to 150, 160,000 to put a granny flat in the backyard. So people look at this as a good option these days. But as Cathy said, be aware of all the ins and outs as far as payments go with Centrelink. The other one I want to talk about tonight is aged care facilities. I know we put my grandma in an aged care facility a few years back, and wow, don't they sting you? Mm-hmm. So tell us some of the pros and cons about aged care.
Okay, so aged care is a minefield, and I suggest that if you are looking at something like that, you do get professional advice. But in a general sense, you're looking at 4 levels of potential fees when you're going into aged care. The first one is an accommodation cost. That can be paid either as a lump sum, and in this general area, 800,000 for a room is not unusual. You could probably get something around the 500,000 to 600,000 if you really looked. Now, that doesn't have to be paid. If you've got the money, then it's certainly the right way to go. But if you don't, you can still go into a facility. So you can either pay the lump sum or an ongoing daily cost. Now, the ongoing daily cost is calculated at 5.76% of what you haven't paid them. So let's say you had an $800,000 lump sum that could be paid, but if you didn't pay that, you could be paying, I think it's about $122 per day in addition to your other fees. So it can be quite expensive. Or you can do a bit of both. So you could pay $400,000 and then half of the ongoing fee. So there are ways to make it work for everybody. So that's the accommodation cost. You've then got what they call a basic daily fee. I think it's about $50 or so per day at the moment, and that covers your care and your meals, basically. Then you've got a means tested fee, which is based on how many assets do you have, how much income do you have, very complicated calculation. Not unusual for that to be around about another $30 to $40 a day for a fairly standard financial situation. And then the final one is not in every facility. So I think it's really important when you are looking at these things to find out whether this extra services fee does apply where you're looking, because that can be an extra $25 to $35 per day. A lot of the nicer facilities with more choice for dinner, maybe a glass of wine with dinner, all of those things they see as the extra services. So you just need to be very aware of that last one, because that can add up to quite a lot of extra fee in a 12-month period.
So we can see why people want to stay in their homes for a lot longer.
Yes.
But I suppose the whole thing around it is make sure you do get professional advice if you yourself or your family are going down that road, because there are lots of ins and outs, and you do need to speak to someone like Cathy who can make you aware of them all, because quite often it's a very hard thing to do. I know ourselves looking around all the nursing homes, you walk out, you've got tears rolling down your face, you're thinking, I can't put my family here, but you know, sometimes decisions have to be made, and you've just got to make sure you've got people around you that can help you with the good advice.
And a lot of them these days are actually quite nice. I know a lot of people still think of the old nursing home and, you know, you wouldn't want to go near the place, but there are some very nice facilities around. So I don't think it's quite as daunting in that respect as it has been in the past, but cost is certainly a big factor these days.
Yeah. So pretty much summing up the options for a downsizer, we can go to a small freestanding home, we can go to a villa, we can have a townhouse, which obviously has stairs. So if you've got a dicky need like me, you probably wouldn't like that. Or you can go into a unit which has lifts. You can look at ground floor units or even look in the higher levels. We've got retirement villages, we've got granny flats, and we've got aged care facilities. So there's lots of different options there. If anybody does want to move out of their big 5-bedroom, 2-story homes with massive yards and pools and all the maintenance, there's lots of options around. So a lot of people say, if I go and sell my 5-bedroom home, I'm going to be left with lots of money. Now, what can they do with that money?
Okay, so in the past, if you were over 65, the only choice you had was to invest that in your own name outside the superannuation environment and deal with the tax consequences. As at the 1st of July this year, there are new rules that say that if you are downsizing and you are over 65, even if you are not meeting any work tests, so you're not doing any work anymore, you're normally too old to contribute to super, they will let you then put up to $300,000 into superannuation, either for a single person or each for a couple. And that can be a really good way of reducing your tax in the future and getting that money into a very tax effective, basically tax-free environment. There are some pretty stringent rules that go with that. You've got to have owned the property for at least 10 years. It must be subject to the CGT exemption. So to allow your property to have no capital gains tax payable upon sale, it has to have been your principal place of residence. That means that all of your mail has been going there, you've lived there regularly. You need to have signed the contract after the 1st of July 2018. So unless you've done something before the beginning of last month, then everybody will be okay with that. The contribution needs to be made within 90 days of settlement. So there's a very strict time frame there. There are a few cases that they will extend that, but you can't just expect that that will be given. So you would have to ask the ATO to give you a special exemption there. Things like we were just talking before about, there's a hold up on certain units down at Miranda that are being having issues with Sydney Water, so there's a delay. So these people don't necessarily want to put all of this money into super because they haven't been able to pay their final payment. They're not into their house. What if there are other expenses that come up that they weren't expecting? In that case, the ATO would grant an extension and it was out of the people's control. Yeah. But you couldn't just say, oh, I forgot, can I have an extension? So there are certain times that they will allow that.
So finally, we got something good from the government.
Yes. It was probably the best thing that came out of last year's budget.
Very good. I know some people I've just sold for, they're very grateful of this new law, being able to put the 300,000 in each into their super, because they've sold for over $1 million and they're buying for a lot less. So, you know, it's going to be very good for them.
It is worth keeping in mind as well that the money doesn't necessarily have to come from a home sale. It doesn't have to be a downsize. You must sell a property, but if you sell for $1 million and buy for $1 million, but you've got 600 spare sitting in the bank, you can still do this. They don't say that it has to be spare. So just keep that in mind as well.
That's good to know. Now, the other thing a lot of people say to me is, am I going to lose my pension? You know, what's the go with Centrelink and what are the implications of having extra money around?
Okay, so if you do have extra money, yes, you are going to be hit with a Centrelink implication of some sort. So additional money, whether it's in a super account, a pension account, a non-super investment, whatever it may be, it's still going to be assessed for the assets test and the income will be deemed. Deeming is quite a complicated way of them calculating income. They basically can't keep up with who is earning exactly what on their investments and their bank accounts. So they deem that you are earning a certain amount. So for every extra $10,000 that Centrelink become aware that you have, a single person would lose $30 a fortnight in age pension and a couple would lose $30 combined per fortnight in age pension. So you can imagine if that's an extra 100,000, then that's an extra $300. They apply the assets test and the income test, so it needs to be very carefully looked at what the implications of doing this may be before you take the steps.
Yeah, definitely. Some other things I get asked is, when is the right time to downsize?
A lot of people do leave it too late. You want to be able to do it while you're in control and you're making the decisions. People that leave it too late will often find that they're forced to do it, and that's not really the nicest way to go about it. Your family may come in and have to take over. I just think, yes, being able to do it while you're in control is definitely important.
Yeah, I've always found I sell a lot of my lawn bowlers' homes. I don't know if a lot of you know, but I used to play lawn bowls for Australia, and I'm quite lucky. I have a very big referral base down at the bowling club. And I have a lot of people that have been in their homes 50 and 60 years, and they say to me, Kat, it's all just too hard. And I say, well, do it while you're both well. You know, it's even harder when one of you isn't around. And so I will sell their home, and then they'll come back to me and they'll say, thanks, Kat, I'm so grateful that you convinced us to go when we're both really well. And then, you know, a year later, something happens to one of them. So, you know, it's really, really good advice to do it when you're both well, when you're both fit, because it is a big thing. You know, moving home is not easy. Going through the process of selling is not easy. You know, you've got to make sure you've got that really good support around you, some good agents, some good teams to work with, that will hold your hand, that will guide you through the process, because it's not over in one day. It takes a good 4 to 6 weeks to properly sell a property, and it can be quite daunting. And you know what? There's sometimes sleepless nights, but if you've got really good people around you to guide you, it makes it a hell of a lot easier. So yeah, don't wait until, you know, your family's on the doorstep and says, come on, mum and dad, you have to move now, because it's only going to make things harder on you. The other question I quite often get asked is, should I buy first or should I sell first?
It's a very good question. In a lot of cases, probably most cases, you wouldn't want to commit to a purchase until you already know what you've got to spend. Because with the market as it is at the moment, it seems to be dropping a little bit. A lot of us, I think, are guessing what our homes may be worth, and maybe we're overestimating a little bit. So you don't want to leave yourself short. Not always the case though. There are, with retirement villages and aged care facilities, they will allow you a grace period because they know that you do have to go and sell your property. Because these places often involve a waiting list, they don't expect you to sell your property, then get on the waiting list for 12 months and where are you going to live in the meantime? So they will put you on the waiting list, your name might come up, they say, all right, your place will be ready in a month or a week, and you will say, all right, I'll put my place on the market now. They understand that it's not going to happen in a couple of weeks. They will always allow you a good 3 to 4 months before you've got to pay that up front. There will sometimes be, I wouldn't say a penalty, but a cost to be in there before you've given them the lump sum, but it's usually quite fair.
Yeah, I'll have to back that up there. You know, we've probably had across Sydney, we've had about a 5%, 5.4%, I think it was in the financial review this week, average drop over the last year. But prior to that, Kirrawee had almost 40% growth. So, you know, even though we've pulled back, we're still well and truly in front. So with that, I always say to people, if you can, try and sell your property first. Give yourself a longer settlement, which will give yourself time to go and find that right property. And then you've got less stress. You know what's in your pocket. You know exactly how much you can go and spend, and you know what's going to be left over at the end of the day. And as Cathy said, we've just sold to people that are moving up the road here at Sir Donald Robinson. And they found out they had a position. They were very excited. They came in here, hey, Kat, come and sell our home. And I was very lucky. It was the second home we had sold for them. And they've now got a month where it's getting refurbished. and then they've got 3 months before they have to settle the bill. So in the meantime, we've sold their property and we've given them a long settlement so we can make it all marry up. So they will only have one move. They'll move out of their villa in the morning. They'll go across to Donald Robinson, move in there in the afternoon, and all the money just happens on the day, which is probably the easiest move that you can make. So that's probably the best advice I can give. But yes, you're correct. There's a lot of agents out there at the moment that go in and pitch these really high prices to people to try and get business. I don't agree in that. I'm one of those agents. If I can't show you the recent comparable sales and show you honest history, which will back up my figures, I won't go in there just to try and get the business. This is really important because if you just go with someone because they're telling you a high price, you could be sitting on the market in this type of market 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. I've just had my next door neighbour sit on the market for 10 months. It killed me every day looking at that sign. But it was because they were promised the world and nothing delivered. So make sure you do shop around when you are talking with agents and make sure you are getting the right advice. Now, other things, I get some people that they'll come to me and they'll go, oh, Kat, our family has told us that we've got to downsize. Like, what should we do? That's quite a common thing that I'm hearing. It's not that they want to downsize, it's our family's told us we have to. Do you often hear that?
I do. And the family always are doing it, well, not always, mostly doing it from a position of concern because they think mum and dad aren't coping very well at home. There are a few things to take into account. There is a lot of help that you can get at home these days that is government subsidised. And they do encourage you to stay at home for as long as you can. So maybe a conversation about that with the kids and possibly with a local social worker to find out what is available before you make that decision. You don't want to make the decision then find out that you could have stayed at home.
Yeah, that's very good advice. And yeah, people aren't aware. There are so many things. I know I was in one of my bowlers' homes the other day. They've got someone that comes and does the lawns for them. They've got a cleaner that comes in that races around doing the cleaning. And they've got people that bring meals to them. So they've got it, you know, all set up, which is great.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, especially if you've got a couple at home, the only reason you need to go away from the home is if you do need full-time medical care. You can have nurses come every day, or I find a lot of single people, if they become unwell and can't get out and about, the right time for them maybe to move as well, so that they do have that company.
Yeah. Other things I get asked, I have so much stuff. I've been here 40 years. Where do I put it all, Pat? That just makes me laugh every time. So I always say to people, look, I would rather less stuff in your house, more stuff in your garage. If you've got a storage unit, fantastic, let's fill it up. Because if you are going to sell your property, the least amount of things we can have in the home, the better. Because we need to make every room look as big and as bright as possible. I like going around to people's homes and, you know, room by room, let's write a list together and try and help you out as much as I can that way. We also do styling here, or property staging. So we can help get your property ready and make it look all pretty. Because you've always got to remember, an open home is not as if you're living there. An open home is, it's showtime. People are looking, people are wanting to imagine their things in your home. So if you've got too many overpowering pink walls, we probably want to change them to something a bit more neutral. But yeah, there's lots of advice that we can give. So pick up the phone, give us a call, and we'll go through room by room and help you work out the easiest way to move things out. The other thing a lot of people ask me, Cathy, is are there companies that can come in and help me move?
There are. These days, as I said before, you can pay anyone to do anything. So there definitely are companies that will come in and give you a hand. One thing I would say, I find a lot of people, if they are doing a move from a big house to a smaller residence, they take the advantage to buy themselves some new things. Sometimes the big furniture from the big rooms won't fit into your smaller space. So rather than waiting until you're putting it all into the new space and it doesn't fit, make some plans along the way. And that can be a really nice feeling to be taking all of your new things into your new place with you.
Yeah, it's you've got to sort of be a bit ruthless. You've got to go, you know what, this means something to me, it's staying. This doesn't mean anything, it's going. Because quite often people just don't comprehend how big you've gone from a 5-bedroom house down to a 2 or 3 bedroom unit or villa. You know, you've got one living area rather than 2 or 3. You've got to do a pretty big cull. So, you know, get your skip bin, put your ruthless hat on, and go, yes, love it, keeping it. No, I can part with it. The removalist that I recommend is Dragon Piano Removals. They don't just do pianos, they do your whole home. I actually sold his mum's house, so he will look after you. I was speaking to him today, and he said he has some ladies that can come in and do all the packing. So he suggested you prepare the week prior. You get your ladies in a couple of days before. They will go and pack up the entire house while you have a cup of tea or coffee. And they'll just write on the boxes, kitchen, bedroom, whatever. The removalist will come in, take it all across to your new place. The packers can come back in and they can unpack for you while you have a cup of tea or coffee. I had one of my bowlers do this a couple of years ago, and I didn't believe that anyone did it. I went there and I watched it and I just laughed. They sat on the lounge having cake and coffee while these people packed up their house. So there are people out there. Take advantage of it. If you're not well enough to do it all yourself, get people in to help. Something else that I get asked is, you know, this is quite overwhelming. You know, I've been here 60 years. I've brought up my kids here. You know, I just can't part, you know, with leaving this house. It's going to be so hard. It's something that quite often I get asked. And I always say to people, just remember, I'm selling a shell. You take all your memories with you. No memories are left in that house. Everything comes with you. And I think if you take that approach, it's a lot easier to sell. It's a lot easier to close that door for the last time. The other good advice, I think, is, you know, just take things step by step. Keep it simple, you know, room by room, work out what you're going to do. Give yourself a plan, write it down, and just keep it as simple as possible, because it can be overwhelming. Make sure you've got some really good support around you. You know, if you've got your partner or your kids, you know, make sure they're coming on the journey with you. You know, get your agent, hold their hand and say, come on, let's go. Do it together. Don't try and do it alone, because it can get overwhelming. Yeah?
Yeah, most definitely.
Some other things are, a lot of people think because they've been in their home for so long, it's starting to look tired, that they've got to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to do it up. Yeah. Look, that in some places is correct. In other places, you're only spending money that the buyer should be spending. So don't overcapitalize on your property. Make sure you get the agent down and get their advice before you start ripping out kitchens and bathrooms and things like that. Because the way you renovate may not be the way the buyer wants it. So the buyer's only going to rip it out anyway, and they're not going to pay you more money for something they want to rip out. So, you know, make sure you get the advice from your agent first. Quite often, like the general things of water blasting, gardening, all those sort of things, yes, are fantastic to do. But big ticket items like kitchens and bathrooms, get advice before you start touching them, because you don't want to spend money on your sale when you want to go and spend money on your purchase and do that up nice and pretty. Yeah. What are some other key questions you get asked when people sit in front of you?
One of the big things is how much they should spend on the property. So I do agree that you need to speak to the agent, especially if you've got a very old house that potentially is going to be a knockdown. And I know a lot of us love our houses, but maybe somebody thinks that the land's more valuable. And if you spent $30,000 on a new kitchen and then they're going to come and knock the whole thing down anyway, then that was just a real waste.
Yeah, developers aren't emotional people, they're calculator people. So they go, okay, what can we put on your block? How much is it going to cost me and how much am I going to pay someone for the land? They don't care if it's a 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom, renovated, unrenovated home. They'll just purely look at all the math. So yeah, definitely get the advice first. Don't go start spending thousands and thousands of dollars. Now, people always say to me, Kat, how much is going to be left in my pocket? Yeah, it's a common thing. I'm going to do an example up here on the board for you, which is going to show you a basic house. So basically, if you've got a home and it's worth around $1.2 million, you will find an agent fee. Roughly a good agent these days is around 1.8% through to about 2.2%. So you'll be spending about $21,000 with your agent. Your marketing costs, which is your internet, your brochures, your signs, all the bits and bobs, you're going to look around $5,000. A solicitor or a conveyancer to prepare a contract for sale, you'll be looking around $1,600. To get a pest and building report on your property is just $50. We have a guy, Jonathan from JMH. He comes in, he prepares the report for you, and then the buyers then buy the report. That's why you only pay $50. A removalist, on average, they're between $700 to $1,000. And then if you need to do a mini makeover like gardens, water blasting, maybe a touch up of paint on a few areas, you're looking around the $850 mark, and other costs I've put in $500. So from that 1.2, you're left with about 1,170 in your hands. So then we need to go and buy. So we go down the road and we find ourselves a beautiful property worth about $1 million. So for that $1 million, you're going to buy the pest and building report, which will cost you $500. You then got the solicitor or conveyancer again, which is around $1,500. You've got your connections, so setting up your Telstra again, your internet, your water, your electricity, all of that. You're looking about $500. I've allowed $2,000 here for some general maintenance around the property. And then the good old government will hit you up for stamp duty. So stamp duty on $1 million is around $40,500, which means you'll be left with, well, you'll be paying out $1,045,000. So putting all of this together, your selling side of things, you're at 1,170. Your buying side of things, you're at $1,045,000, which is going to leave you approximately $125,000 in your pocket after you've bought and sold. So that just gives you a bit of a rundown on an example on how you are left with money. And then Cathy tells you how to spend it. Yeah,
It's a fantastic way for people that are feeling like they're running a little bit low. We gave up work several years ago. We've spent a lot of our super. There doesn't seem to be much left, but we'd really like to still do some trips and buy a new car. It's a great way of freeing up a bit of capital.
Yeah. You know, a lot of people these days have a lot of money tied into their home and they want to have the holidays and, you know, they want to bowl all around the world. But this way you can do that. Like Annie over the back here, she got herself a little camper van and went trekking around Australia. So, you know, this helps you to be able to do those things rather than having all your money tied up in your house. You know, go and live life while you're young. Now, I do have for anyone that's interested here tonight, or if you want to email me a little rundown of what I've just done on the board there, so you can do that with your property and try and get an idea on how much you're going to be left over. Otherwise, give me a ring. I'll come round and I'll do it for you. Now, we've also put in your packs tonight a little guide to downsizing. So you can actually see, you know, a lot of people say to me, we can't buy a property for $1 million, Kat. Well, there's lots of examples in here of things that have recently sold under $1 million. There are things around. You've just got to look. You know, get in line with a good agent, give them your details, tell them what you want, and tell them, go and find me a property. Make the agent do their job. And, you know, you'll be quite surprised at what is out there. In that little book has got the stamp duty calendar and all of that as well. Now, earlier on, I was talking about a timeline. So in the book, I've got virtually to put your property on the market, allow yourself 1 to 2 weeks. Yeah, we get the property ready, we go and do a photo shoot, we get Danielle to do all the marketing with you, and then after we do that, we go live on the internet. We start bringing buyers through the property, and then if priced correctly, if presented correctly, and promoted correctly, it should take you about 30 days to sell your property. Even in a market that's a bit slower like now, if you have got an enthusiastic agent that's correctly doing everything for your property, it should take approximately 30 days to sell. From there, you'll then have the signed contract, and the agent will be holding the 10% deposit in their trust account. Now, if you do go and buy a property first, sometimes you can have a release of deposit clause in your contract, which will then allow us to release it to things like paying stamp duty, paying a deposit on a property. So you don't have to then go and find that 10% out of your own pocket. So make sure you're talking to your solicitor or conveyancer and making sure you get that release of deposit clause in your contract, which can help to purchase your next property. A lot of people think it's also only a 6-week settlement. Well, no. These days, 3 months, 4 months is quite common. You know, as an agent, I don't really like it because I've got to wait 4 months to be paid. I work for free until settlement. But you know what, if that works in with you and it helps you move, then that's what we do. So don't think it has to be a 6-week settlement. It can go 6, 10, 12, 16, whatever will work for you. Now it's up to the buyer to then request if they want a shorter settlement, and then you have that right to say yes or no. So if you think, oh, a buyer won't like 16 weeks, well, they've got an option to ask. You've got an option to say yes or no. It's your property. You determine how you sell it. So that's in your little book here tonight as well. And I think that's probably about it. Have we covered most things?
I think so.
Yeah. Now, anyone here tonight have any questions for us? Don't be shy. Not at the moment.
Are there any referral websites for people wishing more information online?
For
I guess downsizing.
downsizing in general, I think it's such a broad area because we're talking about the real estate side of things as well as the reinvestment of the funds, as well as all of the different options as far as where you're going to move to. There's not really one central location for all of that information, unfortunately.
So you've really just got to ring up Cathy at Fryer Financial Services, ring up myself here at Katrina Wright Property Excellence, and pick our brains.
That's a better idea, yes.
That's probably the easiest way. Happy to give advice. You know, us helping you helps us in the long run. So we're happy to give away as much as advice as you need. The other thing we've got lots of property coach sessions coming up. The next one is on Thursday, the 6th of September. We're going back to 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock. I'll be talking about styling and staging your property for sale. Underneath our shop here, we have all styling, lounges, dining room tables, pillows, quilts, cushions, everything. We can go in, make it look pretty. I can tell you what the good things to do with colours are and what's in, what's out. We've also got Rod from CNR Security coming. He talks about home security, CCTV, alarms, all of that. He's got a very good background being high up in the police force, so he's a very good man to do. He's done all our cameras here in the shop. And we've also got Jason from Dragon Piano Removals. He's got all the tips and tricks around moving, how to make it easy, how to make him do all the work and you to sit back and take it easy. So 3 good sessions next month, Thursday the 6th of September. But thank you, Cathy, for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. If anyone has any questions for Cathy, jump on Facebook, send us an email here at katrina@katrinawright.com.au. Otherwise, thank you all for coming, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thank you.
Well done.